Back in the late 1960s, a little-known explorer came out of the Everglades with a story that didn't make much sense. According to him, somewhere deep in the flooded interior, he had found what looked like a stone pyramid. Not a mound, not a natural rise, a pyramid. Which, as you can imagine, did not go over especially well. The photos were unclear, the location was vague, and the story itself sounded like the kind of thing that usually stays on the fringe, so it was dismissed, largely forgotten, filed somewhere between local legend and creative storytelling. But over the next few decades, similar reports started to surface. Fishermen, airboat pilots, the occasional explorer who went just far enough off course to see something they couldn't quite explain, and then couldn't quite prove. Which is usually how these things go. The stories never quite lined up, the evidence was never quite solid. And so, the idea of a lost pyramid in the Everglades stayed exactly where you'd expect it, just out of reach, until recently. Because now, we have something those early stories didn't: data. And for the first time in over 50 years, this legend might actually have something to stand on. I'm Noah Adams, and this is Oddity Atlas. In 1969, a surveyor handed the government coordinates to something massive, buried deep in the Florida Everglades. Nothing happened. He filed his field notes, he submitted his maps, he gave them everything, still nothing. 57 years later, researchers ran LIDAR scans over that exact location. The same technology that's been finding hidden Mayan cities under the jungle. The same tech that's quietly rewriting what we thought we knew about the ancient world. And the geometry they came back with does not match the swamp. I'm not going to tell you there's definitely a pyramid under the Florida Everglades. What I am going to tell you is that there's something down there, something with angles, something with structure, in a wetland that should not allow either of those things to exist. And the surveyor who reported it in 1969, he had the coordinates exactly right. This is that story. So, there's a pyramid, maybe, under the Everglades. Weird enough. But here's what I wasn't ready for when I started digging into this. He didn't just find a pyramid, he found a wall, a straight wall, 1 mile long, running directly through active wetland. I'll say that again. A straight, mile-long wall, in a swamp. For context, the Everglades does not do straight lines. It doesn't do flat. It doesn't do consistent. It's one of the most geologically chaotic landscapes in North America. Moving water, peat, sediment that reshapes itself constantly. A straight mile-long anything here isn't just unusual. It's, from a pure physics standpoint, a problem. And when researchers ran the LIDAR scans over this area, the wall shows up. To understand why this matters, you have to understand how LIDAR actually works. From above, an aircraft sweeps the ground with hundreds of thousands of laser pulses every second. Each pulse travels down through the canopy, bouncing off leaves, branches, and eventually the ground itself, before returning to the sensor. By measuring the exact time it takes for those pulses to return, a precise three-dimensional map can be built, point by point, but not every pulse hits the same thing. Some reflect off vegetation, others pass through gaps, reaching the terrain below. And when you filter out everything that isn't ground, what you're left with is the shape of the landscape itself. No trees, no brush, no visual noise, just form. And in a place like the Everglades, flat, flooded, and heavily overgrown, that's often the only way to see what's really there. And most of the time, it shows exactly what you'd expect: natural formations, random patterns, nothing unusual, which, to be fair, is usually what you want when you're scanning the ground, but not here, because buried in this data is a shape that doesn't behave like nature. At first glance, it's easy to dismiss, just another rise in the land. But when you isolate it, the symmetry starts to stand out, edges that feel too clean, angles that feel intentional, and that's when the question starts to form: what are we actually looking at? Here's where things get strange. LIDAR doesn't invent shapes, it reveals what's already there. And in other parts of the world, this same technology has uncovered entire lost cities, hidden for centuries. So if this is real, this wouldn't just be a random formation. It would mean something massive has been sitting here, completely unknown. I want to know what you think before we go any further. Looking at this, does this feel natural to you? Or does it look man-made? Because once you see the angles, it's hard to unsee them. I've tried, it doesn't work. Drop a comment right now. Natural formation, or buried structure. Alright, I'm gonna ask you something, and I want you to actually think about it for a second. Have you ever noticed how Florida is always treated like it doesn't really have a past? Like history just sort of starts when people show up with roads and air conditioning and bad decisions. Because here's the thing. There are parts of Florida that are so difficult to reach, so wet, so hostile, that even modern mapping barely touches them. And when people do wander into those places by accident, they sometimes come back with stories that don't fit the version of history we're comfortable with. This is one of those stories. Here's the detail I cannot stop thinking about. In the private letters, not the official field reports, the private ones he sent to colleagues, there's a description of what he found underneath the main structure. Stairs, going down, underground passages, navigable ones. And here's the part that genuinely lives in my head rent-free. He says those passages were filled with snakes. Not a couple of snakes. Filled. Which, and I say this as someone who has done a lot of Florida research, is actually scientifically interesting. Because snakes don't just pile into random spaces, they aggregate in stable environments. Underground chambers with consistent temperature, consistent humidity, spaces that stay the same year after year, spaces that don't flood, in the middle of the Everglades. Something down there is holding that environment stable. That's either a natural cave system, which this geology basically doesn't support, or it's something that was built to be stable. The LIDAR shows geometry consistent with the second option. Let me be straight with you about what the LIDAR actually shows. It's not a clean pyramid outline. I know that's what you're hoping for. It's not that. The canopy cover scrambles the signal. Decades of swamp growth on top of whatever's down there. The Everglades doesn't give things back easily. But here's what the scans do show. Geometric anomalies, consistent angular relationships, a pattern that geologists describe as, and I'm paraphrasing here, unusual. The kind of shapes that emerge when something was deliberately laid out, not by water, not by wind, not by any of the 100 natural processes that shape this place, by something that understood geometry. The honest answer? We don't know what this is. The more honest answer, nobody seriously tried to find out. And that right there, that's the most Florida thing about this entire story. But the pyramid-like shape isn't the only thing that stands out. There's something else in the data, a long, straight feature, stretching for nearly a mile, and that's where things become much harder to explain. Because in environments like this, straight lines don't just happen. Water erodes unpredictably, soil shifts, vegetation grows unevenly. The result is almost always irregular, curved, organic. Not this, not something that holds direction over that kind of distance. It's the kind of feature you'd expect from something built, not formed, which raises a different kind of question. If this is man-made, then what are we looking at? An ancient outpost? Something connected to early Caribbean or South American cultures? A later settlement, long since reclaimed by the swamp, or even something from the earliest European expeditions, now completely lost to time? The honest answer is, there are no official records of anything like this here. No excavation, no documentation, nothing. Which is not what you'd expect. And to be fair, there are cases where natural geology can produce shapes that look far more structured than they actually are, so that possibility can't be ignored. And yet, the geometry here is difficult to dismiss completely. So either this is one of the most overlooked discoveries in the region, or something about this data isn't what it seems. And the most unsettling part, this wasn't even what anyone was looking for. It just appeared, which raises a much bigger question. If something like this can go unnoticed, how many more are out there? Right now, there's no excavation, no official explanation, just raw data, and a shape that shouldn't be there. Because if this really is a buried structure, then this isn't just a discovery. It changes what we thought we understood about what's hidden beneath this landscape. And the most unsettling part, this was found almost by accident, which means there could be more hidden in plain sight that no one's even looking for yet. So if you want me to keep digging into this, hit subscribe and tell me what you think we're actually looking at here. And here's the part that makes this just a little more interesting. Unlike most discoveries like this one isn't on the other side of the world. It's right here, in Florida, which means, technically, you could go looking for it yourself, because out in the Everglades, there are still experienced airboat captains who know these waterways better than any map ever will. People who've spent years navigating places where GPS tends to lose confidence, and landmarks don't always stay where you remember them. And if you have the time, the budget, and a strong sense of adventure, you might get closer to this mystery than most people ever will. Whether you actually find anything is another question entirely. But then again, in Florida, that's usually part of the appeal. And if you enjoy exploring strange places like this with me, it really does help us out here at Oddity Atlas. If you like the video, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. I read more of those comments than I probably should, and they genuinely help shape what we explore next, because this might not be the only thing we've missed. And once you see the scan again, it looks even less like a coincidence. So, possible ancient pyramid, mile-long wall, underground passages full of snakes. Honestly, I'm already looking at airboat rentals. If this ever gets a real investigation, or if I run out of excuses not to go myself, there will absolutely be a follow-up video. Subscribe so you're there when that happens. You do not want to miss me versus the snakes. And if this gave you even one genuine wait what moment, tap the like button. It tells YouTube to show this to more people who enjoy having their brain broken by Florida on a Thursday afternoon, which is a service I take very seriously. The next video is somehow even weirder than this one. I know I say that every time. I also mean it every time. See you there.